Dr. Nick Delgado here, and we have an exciting event for you tonight. We're talking about the latest breakthroughs in stem cells, interventions with bioidentical hormones, nutraceuticals, and certainly some really advanced concepts that quite likely can help you to live a better quality life. So how many here are past the age of 30? Let me see a show of hands. All right, how many are past the age of 60? Let me see a show of hands. 70? 80? Wow. Give him a big hand. There you go. Awesome. So most of us, I'd like to spend most of the time paying attention to our panelists, because these are the people that are here that have come out tonight to really share with you breakthrough treatments. And the great thing is every one of these doctors are currently treating clients and patients right now on a regular basis. So not only do they have to understand the science of what they're doing in the treatments, but they also have to then figure out how to best treat, because some of these procedures don't really have protocols. They're being evolved by the very practitioners on the panel. So I'd like to start with Dr. Nina Sachdev and tell us a little bit about what you're doing in Beverly Hills, California, and what it is that you feel is the most important thing that the people watching the show should know about. And I'll ask that same question to each of you.
Huh? Okay.
Go ahead.
So I think one of the most important things, if I had, and time is limited, it's limited time, that if I could tell you is that balancing your biological train is the most important thing. And there are so many ways to do it. And that's really why we're here at this conference. The start of bioenergetic medicine. Yeah. And there's a change into what we are now coming to understand, the concept of bioenergetic medicine.
Just speak up.
Something wrong with them. Testing.
Green light is on.
They're not working. Oh, now they're working. Yell to it.
Now it's working, right? Okay. Dr. Delgado, ask the question again. Ask the question again.
Well, here with practitioners that are currently providing treatments and protocols. So what's the most important thing that you find in the intervention for your patients?
One of the most important things that I limit your biological terrain, and that means one of the most important things that I can stress to everyone is balancing your biological terrain. And by that, I mean, it's not just about getting a vertical. It's not just about getting stem cells. It's not just about going and getting a whole bunch of medicines to suddenly think that, oh, all my blood parameters are doing okay, so I must be healthy. It's what is that biological terrain? What is a cell? That environment that the cell is in. What's happening there? And that starts at when I started so many years ago, was the start of functional medicine. Functional medicine believes in looking at our imbalances. So the biological terrain becomes, look at your immune system imbalances, look at your hormone imbalances, neurotransmitter imbalances, your immune system imbalances, environmental toxin exposure, your mind, body, and all your epigenetics, so for the maybe harboring trauma in the past, or the epigenetics of feelings on all the senses. There's so many imbalances that can occur. Mitochondrial dysfunction, which is one of the theories of aging, and these are things that you don't commonly understand, but yet you understand the concept of medicine. And so this is, to me, this conference is like what I started in anti-aging. Remember, Nick? We started this like maybe 20 years ago, where people were, it was more like the Wild Wild West. We weren't really sure, oh my gosh, is this the right conference? I don't know if this is really going to work. And then we set out to realize, okay, there was certain scientific science and theories and all these hypotheses came together, and now it grew into a field called anti-aging and regenerative medicine, which involves functional medicine, a strong knowledge of aesthetic medicine, stem cell, regenerative medicine, and so much of this medicine mixed together. And I think this is the next frontier, is bioenergetic medicine. So it is the biological train, which is composed of all of these things that I talked about, looking at these imbalances that compromise the true body balance. And one of the parameters in the pioneers right here, which I'm so glad David is introducing, is a concept of frequencies. And all the cells have frequencies. We all have frequencies that we even if I touch him, he may tomorrow say, oh my gosh, I just suddenly feel so much better. That's because I carry a frequency. And the concept of energy, that one DNA strand has enough energy to run a computer, that's a pretty strong statement. So energy, and viewed as different forms of energy other than just electricity or Tesla waves, energy as frequencies, vibration, I think that's a new frontier to blend in.
Thank you. Great answer. And on that note, I'd say we're particularly focusing on what you could call the frequency medicine side of the equation. And our particular art is what we call photoacoustic resonance. And it goes beyond just being ordinary laser waves, for example. We create a special type of waveform where instead of having the waves in phase, which is a typical laser, creating an amplified wave, we have an optical device that allows us to align the waves exactly out of phase. And what you can see by the waveform is it goes from basically being a transverse wave, which is a typical light wave, to more of a compression, decompression, that is more of a longitudinal type sound wave. So the light wave becomes more akin to a type of sound wave, and that allows us to get a different level of depth of penetration, much more than would be typical of just laser light, which in visible wavelengths is only typically going 2 to 5 millimeters through the skin. So we use various frequencies of photoacoustic resonance for balancing effects in the body, and we've stumbled upon a particular photoacoustic resonance that seems to attract stem cells to be attracted to and localize where that signature is. So it gives a unique way of getting a quantum-like enhanced probability effect of the cells going exactly where we want them to go. And like you, we are into the concept of the nutraceutical balanced domain. And for each situation, we look at the combination of nutrients and cofactors that best support that particular organ.
Okay. Dr. Ed Parks?
Yes.
What is the most important intervention that you would want your patients to have an opportunity to avail themselves of?
I would say this is not my area of expertise. I do have the first book I wrote, I quoted Tesla talking about studying non-measurable physical phenomena. And I do have a casual understanding of Royal Rife and what he said about frequencies, but it's definitely not my area of expertise. So I think my area...
In terms of your expertise,
Yeah.
go ahead with that.
No, I think that what I'm thinking is I wrote a book for Hay House describing to people how they can be the masters of their own regeneration. And in doing so, it was surprising as a trained physician how little I really understood about things that we should all be teaching kids in school. Sleep, breathing. I mean, what's more important than breathing? You can go weeks without eating, days without drinking. minutes without breathing, but people don't even understand the physiology of that. So I wrote a book explaining how breathing, sleeping, the mind works, even downloaded, as people will say at this conference, from Source or whatever channel, a whole other theory about how the mind works. And I decided that all thinking was actually mitigated by emotion, called emotional metatagging. So I think that all writing, someone mentioned that her friend wrote a book, channeled it. I think all writing comes from a different place. We just write it down. And so I attempted to explain how eating, exercise, even supplements, and the responses I got made a lot of people angry, and that's fine. If you're not making people angry, then you're not really pushing the envelope. So that's the book that I wrote, The Telomere Miracle, and it kind of explains things that we should know, that eating glycemic foods makes us fat because of a certain mechanism, glycemic index, but a lot of things that we don't know. Like most people don't know that you wake up every 90 minutes when you sleep. Everyone does, everyone always has. So in the course of my 11-year journey through telomerase activation, a lot of weird phenomena have come out, and I've blogged and made videos on them for YouTube. But I'm just starting to figure this out too. So, I do think that frequency is, I've been on a Royal Rife machine and it did something. But yeah, that's way, way, way outside my box. So I try and keep it kind of in the medical realm, but my latest focus has just been to teach people how to understand how their bodies work. Because you would think that would be part of the user's manual when you're born or go through grade school, but now they don't even teach cursive in school, so who knows? So, thank you.
Dr. Jeffrey Ben.
Hi, good afternoon, good evening. So before I talk about this, I want to thank all the panelists. One, we have medical doctors that are part of this panel. That's a 5D event, so we are sort of breaking really forward new ground. Instead of being in an esoteric discussion about aliens and UFOs and crystals, we're actually having, peer-reviewed doctors on this panel. So I want to really thank the organizer for putting together an amazing, eclectic group of specialists here. And then I also want to thank the crowd, because it is 9 o'clock at night and we have a huge crowd here, and you're dedicated to hearing what we have to say, and we are here to deliver the goods. So towards that end, look, my premise, I'm a licensed chiropractor, certified traditional naturopath, and I believe that the nervous system is the primary system of the body. Because yes, you can go for weeks without food, for days without water, for minutes without breath. You can't go a second without an intact nervous system. My specialty is to tune up your nervous system, because once you have a nervous system that's tuned up or fine-tuned, then everything else works better. The bioresonance, like the photoacoustic that you're referring to. Look, if you don't, if you look at a light bulb, you have a whole lot of voltage, and then if you don't have a switch that's working, you don't have light. So the nervous system is what allows transmission of either life force energy from the universe, whatever you're eating, so the bacteria, what bacteria should get balanced out with other bacteria. I really strongly believe the nervous system is the primary system of the body. That's what I tune up, and that's why I get a lot of results. I've had so many medical doctors come to my booth and get tuned up, and they feel phenomenally different when they leave. Thank you.
Fantastic. Having known each of the doctors and experiencing their therapies and treatments, it really is enlightening to know that there are ways for you to now get these treatments and not have to spend years to really have an opportunity to go to another country to get stem cells or another facility. And the beauty is, these doctors are here in California. And certainly, one of the things that was brought up is your neurological system. And I think there's a growing concern about the ever-increasing rate. And how many here know of someone who's had a stroke? Let me see a show of hands. Wow, virtually everyone. How many know of someone who has MS or ALS, right? Okay, and so we look at these neurological disorders, and we sometimes accept them as normal because they're so common. But does that really mean they have to be part of whether it be the aging process or even part of the disease process? So I'm going to pose that question to each of the doctors. If a patient presents with neurological disorders of various types, what are some of the things that we can do to help people to overcome and or slow or reverse that process? How many here have know someone with Alzheimer's disease, right? Dementia, right? So oftentimes we think there's nothing we can do, and in reality, there's a lot that can be done. So Dr. Nainasashif, what is your feeling about neurological disorders? And Jeffrey Benton, pass the mic down. What do we need to do to intervene to help people have a higher cognitive function, and if they are stricken with this quote diagnosis without putting the label on them, but what do we need to do, Parkinson's included? I mean, do you have some experience with some of these types of conditions, and what have you seen works for these patients?
Absolutely, I've had experience, and I will tell you that really there's a synergistic effect between what all of us are talking about, and what I mean by that is that you have to look at the biochemistry. Biochemistry is associated with frequencies. It's associated with what he's saying affects the frequencies and what I'm talking about, the imbalances. The nervous system is a result of electricity and frequencies of the cells, which really operate at the neuronal level. That's what the nervous system does. And so having said that, it's about biochemically, there are a couple of theories of aging. Okay, one is mitochondrial dysfunction. 2/3 of your brain. This is a fact that you don't even argue with me because it's a fact. It's a biochemistry fact. 2/3 of the brain is mitochondria. 2/3 of the heart muscle is mitochondria. So if 2/3 of the brain is mitochondria, and that's one of the theories of aging, that means mitochondrial dysfunction is and can be a cause of the stroke. It can be a cause of the dementia. So rather than trying to figure out conventionally, which is, as a conventional doctor, this is what frustrated me the most, I don't want to wait until a disease appears. I want to look at your imbalance and stop that before it happens. So if I'm going to do that, then, and I know that 2/3 of brain is mitochondrial dysfunction, would it be not to my advantage to do two things: improve your mitochondrial dysfunction and to generate, if I can, mitochondrial biogenesis, generating a new mitochondria. So think about that. That's what biochemistry-wise, that's what I want to do. And there's nutrients, there's hormones, there's frequencies, there's what sleep, there's what breathing, all of that affects the mitochondrial function. So that's very important. The second theory is oxidative stress. So if you have a lot of free radicals, and that's producing, a lot of free radicals produce a lot of damage. And that damage ultimately creates to so much inflammation, and we're realizing that chronic disease is inflammation. It is not simply just, oh, this is a chronic disease and I have to live with it because it's in my genetics. Well, that's because your parents aging the same way that you're aging. Maybe you're eating the same thing that they were eating, and you're creating inflammation. And so that oxidative stress, when it leads to inflammation, is going to create havoc in the brain, again leading to those possible disease states. Third theory, there is the vascular lining, the endothelial lining, is suddenly not as smooth. It starts getting sticky because of damage. Maybe free radicals, maybe mitochondrial dysfunction, which is lack of ability to produce oxygen. Then those arteries start to get more stiff, and they may throw off a plaque, causing a stroke, or maybe in a diabetes, you've got small vessel disease affecting your brain, again, causing you to get dementia. Why not improve that? There's nitric oxide. This Nobel Prize winner has talked about nitric oxide. And there's nutrients and nutrigenomic substances that can cause that stickiness to be the endothelial, improve the endothelial functioning. So that's a third. Looking at fourth is telomeres and DNA damage. Okay, we can improve that. We've got nutrients. We've got, again, all what we were talking about today. Again, my point in telling you this is a synergy, and looking at all of these things, we have hormones, nutrients, stem cells, we have breathing, we've got sleep, we've got frequencies and bioresonance. And that's what the art of the doctor is, to put that system together. Stop looking at things vertically, please.
Very good. Excellent.
But it's so true. We look at so much vertical. It's in America and everywhere else. This is the answer. I've got the answer to everything. And it's not. It's not. That's why all the people solve things, right? All the people solve things together. We are a force together. We're not just a vertical. It's not just one person.
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
In a Canon McDonald, if you go out of box, they will go ooh, ooh.
And we're all out of the box. 20 years ago, we were out of the box, and anti-aging is now a certified amazing specialty, and that's what bioenergy medicine is going to be. We're starting here, esoteric, and watch, we'll all be here 20 years from now, and it'll be a very different ball.
Dr. Todd, neurological disorders, what can we do for the intervention and the treatment, and what have you seen that's successful for these people?
Mm-hmm. So that was an excellent and comprehensive response from the standpoint of those multi-layers and putting them together. We more specifically have been looking at the process beyond the nutritional balancing, and you mentioned many of the typical nutrients that have shown benefit with neurologic disorders that can be shifted from disorder to disorder, whether you're balancing the autoimmune issues with MS or providing dopamine support in Parkinson's, for example. And we have an experience with using the photoacoustic process to send blood-derived stem cells, we believe, in an increased likelihood to the particularly affected area of the brain. So, for example, with Parkinson's, by sending the cells, or at least sending a signal from 3 different axes to the substantia nigra, we have seen significant improvement in the neurologic symptoms. And because of the degenerative process, we find there are required repeated treatments to sustain and build a result, yet the process of sending the cells in a preferential way is getting a meaningful benefit. And that's been true of MS and stroke as well.
Beautiful. Okay. Dr. Ed Parks, neurological disorders, are there some interventions, whether it be stem cells and or other theories that you've come across that will help people with what otherwise seems to be a hopeless condition of aging, which is it really aging by itself?
I mean, it can be aging, it can be other things. I mean, I come at it from a different perspective, which is that telomere erosion happens in stem cells, and there are neural stem cells, and so I feel like there may be a common cause there, just as friction or oxidation causes all car parts to break down. I mean, having said that, if you go onto my YouTube channel, Dr. Park 65, DRPA RK65, I've done shows on MS and Parkinson's and brain trauma and paralysis. And again, same thing, I treat it from a beginner mindset and explain the physiology at 8th grade level. So if you want to avail yourself of that, anecdotally, I only do these podcasts when 1 or 2 people say, hey, I've got a great... Okay, I'm getting a little feedback howl there. Okay, so, okay. It's YouTube DRPARK65. I got like 50 podcasts on real case reports. But more importantly, you know, I talk about the telomere science. There's sometimes quite a few articles. And I talk about the physiology so anybody can understand it. And I think that's really my gift. I don't really have a great deal of expertise, but I can communicate to people in a way that they can understand. So yeah, I mean, it's all as some guy named Royal Rife apparently played around with a frequency machine and apparently this, that, and the other. And I went to my friend's house he had a machine and he had like 600 programs to talk to different parts of your body in different languages. Certainly not a language I understand, but someday we will learn how to tickle and stimulate and inhibit, and I'm very excited about that. But I know that we can mitigate and intervene at functional levels. So learning to breathe, learning to meditate. And I do think that the vast majority of our problems are self-inflicted and neurotic, actually, quite frankly. So if you haven't tried that orgone bubble machine, I really felt a catharsis there. And the terminology they use is some negative evil spirit, or in my book I talk about the fact that we host all these demons, these neuroses from childhood, like you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, but they're there as guests and we worship them. And so they need to be, just kind of demoted a little bit, because we run on them. If we don't have any neurosis, we don't want to get up in the morning. We're just, but then again, most of what we see as disease, to be honest, is, I'm overeating because I'm depressed. I'm stressed out. I got Crohn's disease. So many of it comes from a functional, neurotic, and quite frankly, childhood-based thing. So there's many ways to tackle the problem, but I think unless and until people really examine their own schemas and their neuroses, they're not going to benefit from any of it. The medicines, the breathing, the exercise, some people run on neuroses, but it's still important to deconstruct a bit, I think, for things to move. Try that energy crystal thing. It's really amazing. Oh, and also the vibration thing, very good. I'm hoping there's like a collegial discount on one of those.
Oh,
1,500 rapid release.
Oh, those are amazing.
Talk about frequency and vibration.
Wow.
It's nice, yeah. It's that rapid release. It has the right frequency that I believe it sort of disrupts whatever tension is built up in your muscles and helps drop it off quickly. It's just phenomenal. So I'm sharing the booth. So myself and then Jeff Meyer, he's the owner of Rapid Release. So I'm glad you experienced it. It's like phenomenal stuff.
Yeah, it's like one of those sharper image wands.
Yeah.
Like 20. It's like
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, excellent. Good. So what's the question again? Chronic neurological conditions.
Well,
okay.
neurological issues and
Yeah.
challenges. What do you find? I mean, specifically because obviously that's a big category: ALS, MS, dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's.
Right.
I mean, I give us. Is there different types of approaches to help these people that you utilize? Is it an individualized thing, or is there some general concept that you find that works very well with these patients?
Well, let me give you some case examples of
Perfect.
my own experience. So one, people, I'm not sure if fibromyalgia falls into that category because fibromyalgia is one of those catch-all terms that the medical establishment gives to someone whenever they can't figure out what's going on. Someone has just pain in several parts of their body, and all the lab tests come out relatively normal. And so my solution for that is, one, I strongly believe they have a combination of adrenal fatigue to the point where they don't have like Addison's, like an autoimmune condition, but their adrenal glands are so run down, and as a result of having run down adrenal glands, you have a condition that's called ligament laxity, where your ligaments don't hold well. And what that means to me is if someone comes into my office and I do a chiropractic adjustment and they say, I hurt after the adjustment, that's the red flag that they have ligament laxity, and I have to support their adrenal glands and support healing of the ligaments before I can do a typical adjustment. Another sign of that is if people stand up from sitting or laying down and they're dizzy for several seconds and then it clears up. That's a sign of adrenal fatigue because the adrenal gland produces epinephrine, and the epinephrine going through the brain is supposed to vasoconstrict your blood vessels as you change altitude. And it has to happen very quickly. If your adrenals are burned out and tired, there's a lag. There's a time lag before it can react. And so these are a couple of examples. And people who have fibromyalgia have a combination of adrenal fatigue and some emotional trauma that gets stored in their muscles. And so I'm able to clear those things out quite quickly. So another example, so Alzheimer's. Fascinating work in Alzheimer's. We already have the answer. The answer is already out there. However, the medical establishment, I'm sorry to say, doesn't want us to know. 2 years ago, I take a lot of advanced nutrition protocols and advanced therapies. I took one, and the way they discussed peer-reviewed literature through UCLA Buck Institute, where they had 90% reversal. Like nine out of 10 people, one person was so far gone with Alzheimer's they couldn't get him back, but 9 out of 10 people were put on a protocol of supplements. And they didn't just give you one, because the medical doctors and medical establishment, not the medical doctors, are looking for a silver bullet. And in the case of some of these chronic diseases, there is no one silver bullet. You need several things. Dr. Nick has several protocols we have to give you. Dr. Lee has several protocols. I'm sure all of us have several protocols, and your body needs a little bit of everything. And I saw that. I was so blown away by what I learned, that we can actually reverse Alzheimer's, and they gave us case studies in that seminar, and I have the notes. And then my neighbor downstairs is a medical doctor, and he had to retire because he has Alzheimer's. And he has full-blown Alzheimer's now. It's been 3 years later. And I went to the nurse and says, look, I have a solution to help you. And I got nowhere because they have to go to the medical director, and they don't want to hear what I have to say. So this gentleman, he's a ear, nose, throat doctor. He retired, but he had enough money, and they have nurses changing his whatever. I mean, he's just not in a very good shape. Closer? Sorry. All right. What did I want to say? Oh, okay, so Alzheimer's. Okay, and in contrast to what I learned, 60 Minutes, like a few weeks later, rebroadcast, where they're looking for the silver bullet in Alzheimer's. They found a family down in South America where they found a hereditary link where most of these families have Alzheimer's by the time they're 30. And they're spending $15 million to go down to South America and do this whole cohort study and find out what the silver bullet is. And I wrote 60 Minutes. And I said, and I put in, look, will you please look at the UCLA Buck Research Institute? Here's what they found. They never wrote me back.
It's interesting you bring up Alzheimer's, because when you read the original papers, if you type into DelgadoProtocol.com about Alzheimer's, Dr. Alzheimer's himself documented that when he autopsied the brains of these individuals after they had died, that he found that they had the highest level of atherosclerotic plaques and cholesterol leading to the smallest capillaries to the brain. And he then backtracked and looked at their lipids, high LDL, high total cholesterol, and then he tied it into their diet. And in the book Brain Fitness by Dr. Goldman, they talk about the nun study. The nuns, there was a group of nuns that were on a whole food kind of vegan type diet, oil-free, and then there was another group eating animal product and so forth. And the nuns were eating animal-based foods who had high LDL cholesterol, had the highest incidence of Alzheimer's dementia. The nuns eating plant-based whole food had the least, almost non-existent cases of Alzheimer's. And for some reason, we ignore that. And when doctors check your blood lipid levels and they tell you have a normal cholesterol level, you better be concerned, because normal means you're at risk
Elevated.
as everyone else in this culture. And really, your cholesterol should be no more than 100 plus your age and not over 160. And then doctors will say, well, wait a minute, you need cholesterol to produce hormones, and that's true, but every cell of your body makes cholesterol. Your liver makes the most, so you'll never be deficient in cholesterol, and you have some really obscure type of genetic disorder. That's really, the fact is that the cultures that have the longest life have the least amount of atherosclerotic plaques, the least amount of heart attacks and strokes. And my colleague, Dr. Michael Greger, wrote a book, How Not to Die, and he talks about the 20 leading causes of death. And the problem is that as a culture, we're so used to dying from these diseases that we just accept it. Oh, you had a heart attack, yeah. You know, we go to the funeral and it's like, we accept that. We have to stop accepting that, because you have interventions now, lifestyle medicine interventions, hormonal interventions. I know with 3 family members with Alzheimer's and 2 very wealthy families that asked me to intervene. Like you, I look at the toolbox of what can we do? Change their diet drastically. And the senior care center says they won't eat that. They won't eat fruits and vegetables, beans and peas. Well,
Sure they will.
They can't even recognize you. They're drooling. I think they will eat when you put food in their mouth.
That's right. Put it in front of them, they'll eat it. You know, they won't say, no, I want sugar.
And then the doctor in charge said, well, we can't put them on hormones. And I said, they're deficient. Why wouldn't you? And they said, well, why would you? And they're stage 4. Why would you intervene? Because we need to. And so the families were wealthy enough, we brought in a different doctor. We put them on bioidentical hormones. We got them outdoors in the daylight. We got them getting on a healthy pattern of cortisol and adrenal support. And even in some of them, we inserted testosterone pellets to give them levels of a 20-year-old. And within weeks, these individuals, one, I remember going to Fashion Island and asking her driver, who she was stage 4 Alzheimer's, identifying each storekeeper and remembering stories and recounting everything that she had ever remembered with these people. So I think we have a bias against aging, and we have a bias to think that once we reach a certain age, that's just part of aging, we should just accept it. Do you accept aging? Dr. Nainasachef, what do we do when someone says, you're aging? Oh, Dr.
Well,
Jeffrey Benton, go ahead.
Before we go into that, I wanted to mention, so Dr. Parks mentioned Rife and the Rife technology.
Yes.
It's been around, and he experienced it. And you know, here's a combination of frequency medicine. And if you want to break things down, you know, all these supplements and cofactors that we give are all frequencies, and frequencies that our body need. Depends on how far down to the atom we want to go, and all vibrational frequencies. And I actually want to make a mention, because I think the Rife, you know, this Dr. Rife is amazing, and I've seen these machines progress over the years. And I just want to mention Dr. Olga Goldin. She has a monocore machine, which I believe marries together how the computer and Rife. So you have
Dr.
a machine.
Olga, raise your hand.
Raise your hand, Dr. Olga. Oh, thank you. She's in the crowd. And you're able to marry together Rife frequencies with a computer that can quickly measure the different frequencies and issues in your body and give you a correct frequency diagnosis, you know, in an hour session. So it's like supercharging Rife. And I was really impressed by the machine that she has.
Great. So we really have our final question, because we're going to keep it to what the organizers suggested we stay to, and then we'll break open to individual questions, not necessarily for the audience, but you know, we'll filter in the audience, and you can come up and ask the panelists questions, and each will give you your website at this point. So what is your most important intervention to stop or combat aging? Dr. Nainasachef, what's your website? And then we'll break open to that. Go ahead.
So, well, first of all, my website is 9md.com. That's www.nainamd.com. And my first intervention, because again, you know, when you have dealing with imbalances, if you start at one point, and let's say you don't just get the most optimal result, but you get a 30-40% improvement, and you go on to the next imbalance, guess what? You're just adding to the balance, and eventually you'll get balanced. So and each one of us will start at different points, okay? I happen to think that hormones, because hormones are you have receptors, and when we have receptors, no matter what you do, this is just my experience, because this is what I've done, and similarly, he's going to have a different answer, because he's going to work with frequencies and see the same type of results that I probably see, because everything has frequencies. So if I start with a synergistic and the proper way of doing what I call low-dose physiological bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, but a very key thing is nutrigenomic enhancement. That's my topic. So I use certain nutrients, I use this, and then I'll go on and maybe use a few of the frequency bioresonance machine. That right there is a very and I won't forget to get the patient's story in the epigenetics of some of the imprints of trauma and all of that each one of talks about meditation, sleep, their sleep cycle, and so forth. So again, I do a synergistic blend. Unfortunately, I wish I could give you one simple answer, but I do start with bioidentical hormones is a core component, but it's a synergistic so it's nutrigenomic enhancement, low dose physiological bioidentical hormones combined with some biofrequency and lifestyle modifications. That's the answer. And that is still a synergistic answer.
Very good.
Mic drop,
So your website, and then your primary treatment for dealing with aging.
Sure. Two sites. One is Qigenix.com, Qigenix, which is related to the work with photoacoustic guidance of stem cells. And then the other is a nutraceutical company called Gematria.com, Gematria, where we use the process of photoacoustic resonance to enhance the absorption and bioavailability of the nutrients. And in addition to the last discussion, there are a few things that we've studied in particular, especially the use of sublingual nucleic acids. So for example, we did a study on that formula which was done in middle-aged overweight men, and it was placebo-controlled, done in South Africa. And the study was using the basic amount of the formula, 1 cc or 6 sprays sublingually, combined with 30 minutes of brisk walking per day. And the metrics were quite interesting. So for the placebo group, there was relatively little change, whereas the treated group had an average 10-pound gain in muscle while losing 15 pounds of body weight and increasing aerobic capacity approximately 8%. And there are multiple published studies showing either anti-aging effects or accelerated wound repair, enhanced regeneration of the replacement of the liver with partial hepatectomy, accelerated immune recovery. So combining all these lines of evidence, having a delivery form which is direct into the system as opposed to oral, because the nucleic acids are extensively absorbed by the intestinal bacterial lining, such that very few of the purines and only few of the pyrimidines, roughly 1% of purines and 3% of pyrimidines, are actually absorbed, that you can actually get more effective utilization. That's one of the factors that I think is generally overlooked. And like everybody else, we tend to use methylation factors, boost the nitric oxide mechanism with arginine and so forth.
Wow, impressive.
Yeah.
Dr. Ed Parks.
My answer is easy. I've been taking cycloestradiol, commonly known as TA65, for 11 years, and that's where all my experience lies. And you'd be shocked to know the famous people who take it, including in anti-aging. So I believe it works, and I have 500,000 views on YouTube regarding these case reports. So I think this thing that looks like a vitamin D analog triggers an MAPK sort of endocannabinoid pathway, and it helps to restore. But anyway, I think that the Alzheimer's, going back to that briefly, is the perfect foil for what's the problem with thinking about aging. Alzheimer's, why does it have to be one disease? It's a clinical syndrome. There's many ways to get a messed up brain. And in fact, what we see is that the degenerate nature of man to find fame and fortune is at the cause. People want something that's patentable. If you tell people, oh, Nick will roll you around and give you better food and show you the sun, you're going to be cured of Alzheimer's, I can't own that. I can't get on the cover of Time for that. But yet everything that we do is functional. I mean, the best data we have now is that Alzheimer's is not a disease. It's just you got a bad car battery. How'd you get a car battery? I don't know. There's lots of ways to get a bad car battery. And that the oxidation, the amyloid plaques are just the result of inflammation from a dead brain. Okay? So why would we trust people that are looking for money as a goal to cure Alzheimer's? They just want to fight the war on Alzheimer's. It's every damn thing where you can buy a rubber band and say you're helping. It's probably delaying a cure. So, I mean, the best data we have is like sleep is good to prevent Alzheimer's because there's something that they now know is the glymphatic system. Your brain swells up and all the junk is taken out to the curb. And so no one ever says, well, these old people are not sleeping well. They teach us in med school that old people don't need that much sleep because they don't. Well, what if old people don't need that much sleep because their brains are messed up because they're not sleeping because of this, that, and the other thing? So anyway, functional medicine, there's many ways to get to dysfunction. It's not all one disease. And there's many ways to mitigate it. Frequency, stem cells, exosomes. We need to get away from this sort of simplistic worshiping the experts with the biggest name and the biggest resume. Because, truth is out there, but you're not going to get to it by listening to experts, because experts have it's like trusting the Pentagon to end the war on war.
You probably agree that drug-induced dementia, hypertensive medications, blood pressure medications, prostate medications, all these different medications, oftentimes when a patient's on so many medications, how can they think clearly?
No, clearly. I mean, I think that the sad thing about TV and Marcus Welby and 51, everyone thinks doctors are good people, when in fact, actually we're very morally degenerate. Most of us are. No, I'm not saying that in a bad way. I mean, it's not as bad as journalists or lawyers, But I mean, the fundamental root chakra is self-preservation. And it's very few doctors, 1 in 8, that will do something that's bad for them, that puts them out on a limb. I mean, you're a surgeon, you know this. The worst surgeons are the ones who might have the best smile, the biggest office, but they want to get to the golf course. They want to get home, and so to be a good doctor, you don't only have to be empathic, you have to be courageous, and you have to be willing to get hurt emotionally, professionally, get sued. So the things that you're doing, creating formulations to help people, it's really hard to put yourself out there for what? Nobody knows the good that you do in the dark. The patients don't recognize.
I think it's the fear. I think because I've talked to a lot of my colleagues. I think it's the fear. I've talked to a lot of my colleagues, and I'll tell them, look, this person, okay, for example, trauma. I just give you an example. Great football player, very well known, Hall of Fame. His wife brought me in, and we just did bioidentical hormones, and we know that during traumatic brain injury, pregnenolone and some of these progesterone, all these is very healing. I'm talking about bioidentical, not the synthetic progesterone. It's not going to hit any receptors in the brain, but your natural production of these hormones can. So long story short, we did a couple of interventions and amazing results, and told a couple of my doctor buddies about it, and they're just saying, you know what, I'm not going to do it because they're going to ask me for a standard of care. They're afraid to being hit by the state medical boards. I've been hit by the state medical. I survived it. I got exonerated, but it's a lot of battle, a lot of money. So most of my money goes into having a fund where I know that I have to be an activist and do that. So it's becomes, all of us are probably here out of the box and lifelong to make a difference. And we've let go of that. Gee, we're going to depend on our professions for our livelihood. We no longer do that because we know we're going outside of the box. We know that we're setting something. But the reason we're all passionate about it and why we're here till 11 at night is because we have knowledge like an iPhone. And we didn't bring it to the masses yet. The iPhone is in the hands of everybody. We want to bring this because we know, we walk the talk, and we know that there are so many interventions and so many ways of healing yourself. When I was the Olay ambassador, and I remember going into an interview, and I was asked to represent a skincare line, the Olay Regenerist, you will know this, you can get it right? And it wasn't doing well. It was just not doing well, and back a couple of years ago. And I said, why? It was a surprise interview. I said, why are you asking me? I'm not a surgeon. I was studying to be a surgeon, but I'm not. And I'm an anti-aging expert. It's a field that's not even recognized by the American specialty boards yet. We're fighting for recognition. Why are you asking me over a dermatologist or plastic surgeon? And they said, because we know that the conventional model, this is a billion-dollar company, multi-billion-dollar company, Procter & Gamble, right? I'll recognize that name. They told me, we know that the next $1 trillion is going to be spent on people healing themselves back to wellness. That's pretty profound, isn't it?
Final comment. Let's see. Okay, so my website, www.houdiniofhealing.com. So those of you who want to have something out of the box, come check out what I have. What was the question? To wrap up, we have so many conversations going on. I think the most important intervention is putting the patient first. All of us here are very knowledgeable in our areas, and so start somewhere. Bioidentical hormones. I start off with the nervous system and just put the patient first. I'll start off with the nervous system, and then from there I'll go to adrenal stress, and then thyroid hormones. So I'll go into hormones quickly and how to get the body balanced that way. My starting point is the nervous system, but everyone here has a good starting point, and just put the patient first and start from wherever you start, and be good humans. That's it.
questions. I'm sure you have questions, but let's keep them to individual questions because maybe certain doctors you want to approach. Really, we'll keep it because we did agree to end at 10 p.m. We're a little past that. So thank you, everyone. Dr. Nick Delgado, be well.